They were trapped on an ice floe just a few meters away from the land. How could one person and a group of dogs get across? Seeing the ice floe getting farther and farther away from the shore, Seppala planned to put all his fate on the lead dog. He first fixed the rope firmly on the ice and tied the other end to the lead dog, Togo. Then he picked up Togo and said sorry, then threw Togo out with all his strength. He wanted to pull the entire ice floe with the strength of one dog. After landing, Togo immediately began to crawl forward with difficulty. For the seemingly impossible task behind him, Togo, however, resolutely buried his head and rushed forward. The rope was pulled straight, and his companions behind him also cheered for him. He gritted his teeth and exerted all his strength. He completely forgot that he was no longer young at the age of 12. After experiencing one and another. After a charge, the huge floating ice actually started to move. Seppala untied the rope quickly and then gave an order. The dogs that were ready to go rushed forward one after another. In this way, the dogs successfully jumped onto the shore one after another. Seppala also jumped onto the shore after a burst of acceleration. After landing, he hugged Togo excitedly. At this moment, he really didn't know how to thank this old friend. You know, he tried to abandon it many times 12 years ago. I still remember that Togo was still a little puppy crying for food when they first met, but it was born weak and thin and was not liked by Seppala. In his eyes, this was the result of natural selection. Alaska, which is more than 30 degrees below zero, is particularly cruel to the weak. Even this little guy could barely survive. What could it bring to its tribe? The wife replied, the will to survive. With the wife's repeated insistence, Togo was not abandoned. After a while, it not only survived, but also became energetic. Its excessive energy also gave Seppala a headache. It ran around and bit things and refused to listen to orders. Seppala was furious and gave it to a friend. However, within 3 days, Togo was sent back by his friend again. Seppala had no choice but to put it in the dog pen. As a result, when he saw Seppala going out for training, it desperately dug holes. Other dogs also began to follow suit. When Seppala saw it, he angrily said to Togo, "If I catch you, you're done." So Seppala brought many large stones and surrounded the dog circle. Sure enough, Togo found stones after a little digging. If one hole didn't work, he would move to the next one. After running 6 holes on the edge of the iron net and finding no success, he began to try in a place far away from the iron net. Soon, he poked his furry head out from outside the iron net. Then he ran all the way following Seppala's scent. After a while, he found the training team. He seemed to be born with leadership or troublemaking temperament. All the sled dogs in training would obey his command. Because Togo had not received professional training, he soon led the entire sled team into the lake. This made Seppala, who was soaked all over, extremely angry. As soon as he got home, he sealed off the warehouse. There was no exit, and then Togo was locked in the warehouse. Faced with the airtight environment, Togo had no choice but to run around in the warehouse anxiously. After calming down, he began to look around carefully, found that there was a hole in the roof just big enough for him to get out, so he did it and quickly climbed to a high place with his flexible body. Then there was a crackling sound, and then a head came out of the house and looked at this cute little guy. The wife was doting on him. In this way, Togo successfully escaped from prison again, and then ran excitedly to the master who was training again. After a while, he messed up the training team again. Seppala, who couldn't bear it anymore, decided to send Togo to the city dozens of kilometers away. Although his wife, she was very reluctant, but she could do nothing to face her husband who had made up his mind. Soon they came to the lady's house. Before leaving, Seppala reminded the lady that the dog was very naughty. But the lady, who was fascinated by Togo, said that she didn't care at all. The helpless wife could only make up her mind to leave Togo here alone. This house is very beautiful, but Togo doesn't like it at all. He keeps running around the room and anxiously looking for an exit to return to Seppala's side. The lady thought that as long as she locked him up for a few days, Togo would honestly accept his fate, but she still underestimated Togo's stubbornness. When Togo found the only weak point in the room, he slowly took 2 steps back. When the lady realized something was wrong, it was too late. Soon, the sea who was training Seppala noticed something was wrong again. When he looked up, he saw Togo looking down at him with a smug look on his face. But Seppala couldn't figure out how Togo found him across dozens of kilometers. Seeing the blood flowing from Togo's body, Seppala felt soft-hearted and wanted to take him home. He wanted to carry Togo to the sled to rest, but he didn't want to lie down and sat down on the leader's position. In order to make Togo understand his role, Seppala put him next to the most ferocious dog. Looking at the other dog's grinning face, Togo, who was flexible, immediately showed his nature of licking the dog and licked the ferocious dog comfortably in a short while. So the sled team set off on the road, and Seppala was surprised on the way. It was found that Togo's speed and endurance were obviously better than the dogs in the same row. Seppala suppressed his inner joy, moved Togo forward one row, and tied another dog to the position before Togo. But this dog was not as sensible as Togo, and could only retreat in fear when he saw the other dog baring its teeth. Seppala's excitement was beyond words when he set out again, because he found that Togo was more than enough in this position. So he moved Togo forward one row again, and so on row after row. When the sled team returned home, his wife looked up and saw that Togo had come to the position of the leading dog, and the dogs behind him were all bigger than him. But after this round, no one was dissatisfied, and Togo stood firmly in the center position with his strength. Seeing this scene, his wife was very relieved. At this time, Seppala was extremely excited. He said to his wife excitedly that Togo was not a sled dog, but a natural pilot dog. It was at this time that Seppala named it Togo, the same name as a Japanese naval admiral, because they were not favored at the beginning. Although Seppala began to like Togo a little, in his mind, dogs are dogs. They are just tools of humans, and they must not enter human bedrooms. Since then, Togo has officially become a pilot dog. The former champion teams have also been eclipsed in front of them. Togo has lived up to everyone's expectations and won the first prize again and again in the sled team competition held in the town. 12 years have passed in a flash. I thought life would always be like this. The town was peaceful and comfortable, but the diphtheria virus suddenly broke out that day. More than 10 children in the town were infected, and 5 children had died. The mayor held an emergency meeting to discuss countermeasures. This disease can only be suppressed by serum from thousands of miles away. Once the best injection time is missed, the infected person will die. But the bad thing is that Alaska is experiencing a once-in-a-century blizzard at this time. The air pressure is dropping at an alarming rate. The roads are completely paralyzed and the planes cannot fly. The whole town is shrouded in the shadow of death. In desperation, everyone can only rely on traditional transportation. Everyone's eyes are on Seppala, the most experienced sled driver in the town, and his pilot dog, Togo. The mayor asks Seppala how long it takes to go back and forth. Seppala said frankly that it was not a question of how long it would take, but whether he could come back alive, so he did not dare to agree directly. But on the way home, Seppala passed by the town hospital. Looking at those children who had grown up with him, but whose lives were hanging by a thread, he felt very upset. When he got home, he waxed the sled thoughtfully. The wife understood that he was moved by compassion again, but she asked Seppala not to take Togo with him, and let other dogs in the family be pilot dogs. Because Togo is already 12 years old, he is too old and is likely to die of exhaustion on the road. When she thought that this might be the last few hours she spent with Togo, the wife was heartbroken. But Seppala said that if Togo did not go with me in such terrible weather conditions, it would be. The last few hours we spent, before he finished speaking, there was a knock on the door. It turned out that the mayor came to visit late at night. He really couldn't find any other transportation power. As a good man, Seppala naturally agreed to this adventure. Before leaving, his wife said to Togo that you must come back well and come back to me together. Togo seemed to understand this request and nodded vaguely. In order to save time, Seppala set off early in the morning. The villagers of the town stood on the street early in the morning to see off Seppala's team. There was high respect and hope in their eyes. Seppala understood that this was a race with nature or fate. When they approached the mountains, the wind, snow, and thick fog blocked their eyes. Looking at the front in the blizzard full of unknowns, Seppala put on his gear and led the sled team to rush in without hesitation. In order to save time, Seppala decided to climb over the mountain. In the steep, snow-capped mountains, Seppala could only lead the sled team to climb the slope with difficulty. This blizzard was much more violent than he had imagined. After finally climbing up the steep slope, the real difficulties had just begun. Seppala commanded the sled team to head towards the valley, but the speed of the sled team unconsciously increased when going down the mountain. Seppala was also blown by the wind and snow and could not open his eyes. He could not see the road ahead at all. Fortunately, Togo suddenly realized the danger and stopped before the sled team fell off the cliff. But the other dogs were not so sensitive. Due to inertia, they could not see the road ahead for a while. The team was about to fall off the cliff because they could not brake. Seppala jumped off the sled and prepared to fix the sled with an ice pick, but the speed was too fast and he was pulled away before he could stand firm. Fortunately, at the last moment, Seppala managed to smash the ice pick into the ground, and the dogs stopped less than 1 meter away from the cliff. But the situation was not optimistic. Seppala shouted for Togo to run back. Togo turned around carefully and rushed up suddenly. However, the dogs were so scared that they didn't know what to do. They stuck together tightly and didn't dare to move. No matter how hard Togo tried, it was difficult for him to pull the whole sled up. Fortunately, the dogs soon calmed down and started. He turned around and started to climb up. Finally, with Togo's desperate efforts, the sled was pulled up by him. After they escaped from danger, Seppala found that Togo's paw was injured. When it was dark, they rushed to a nearby post station, and the woman at the post station simply treated Togo's wound. It was still dark the next day. They set off again. In order to save time, Seppala decided to cross the strait, which would save a day. The earlier he got the serum, the more hope the children had, but the price of doing so was that he might die here at any time. Driving on the endless ice field, Seppala and the sled team were like a sharp sword, piercing the wind and snow, and rushing towards the darkness of the dark clouds. But soon, the ice layer that had not yet completely solidified broke, and the explosions came from time to time. The cracking sound startled the well-informed Seppala, not to mention the dogs in front. They had never seen such a scene before, and were all frightened and at a loss. Togo, who had always been fearless, also looked back and looked around. Seppala realized that this was not a solution, so he began to encourage them with words. The dogs gradually regained their confidence in the passionate words of encouragement. At this time, the local newspaper in the town sent a report to the Associated Press, and the American people knew what happened in Alaska. The temperature was close to -50 degrees Celsius, the wind speed was as high as 80 kilometers per hour, and the diphtheria epidemic worsened under the storm. People and dogs embarked on a 1,000-kilometer round-trip journey, regardless of everything. For this heroic race of life and death, everyone had doubts, but their doubts were not whether Seppala could retrieve the medicine in time, but whether they could go back alive. While the media and the onlookers were chattering, Seppala's sled team had successfully crossed the strait and stepped into another equally steep mountain range. Since Seppala's deeds were reported in the newspapers, it triggered heated public opinion. The mayor decided to organize a sled relay. He configured 14 relay teams on the way. The sled teams only needed to relay short distances at one station and pass the serum to the next team. But this premise required Seppala to successfully receive the serum from the relay team on the way. But Seppala's wife pointed out that her husband would definitely take risks. Crossing the strait, it is possible to miss the team from the target perfectly. Seppala, on the other side, knew nothing about this. Due to the long-term running, Seppala was about to be knocked down by sleepiness and fatigue. He only relied on Togo to lead the team to move forward quickly. Unexpectedly, he just happened to pass by the relay team at this time. When the relay team found out, it was too late. He kept shouting at Seppala behind him, but the wind and snow were too loud, and Seppala was too tired to notice it at all. Just when he thought it was useless, Seppala came back from the wind and snow. It turned out that the alert Togo stopped. In this way, in the cold winter with ice and snow, the two hearts finally embraced each other. Seppala also successfully got the life-saving serum. Togo had already exhausted himself to keep up with his master's rapid progress. Many sled dogs of the relay team were buried in the snow-capped mountains of Alaska because of this mission. They were very worried whether Togo had enough energy to complete the next mission. They wanted Togo to stay and recuperate, but Seppala refused. After a simple rest at the post station for one night, Seppala set off again. They admired Seppala's back, but they never thought that Seppala would suddenly turn right and rush straight to the dangerous strait. In order to buy time for the children in the town, Seppala decided to risk crossing the strait again. The temperature at this time was more than 60 degrees below zero, and the ice under his feet was frozen. It is several tens of centimeters thick. However, due to the impact of the hurricane, the ice surface of several tens of centimeters is constantly cracking. Setting foot on this road is equivalent to putting life and death aside. Sure enough, they found that there was no way to go ahead before they walked for a long time, and what's worse is that the compass suddenly failed for some reason. Now there are only two directions left and right, but Seppala has no idea where to go. Now they can only rely on the leader dog Togo to determine the direction. At the critical moment, Togo turned around and began to chase the floating ice. They forged ahead on the mottled and cracked ice. There is a fragmented ice layer with no end in sight in front of them. If they are not careful, they may be swallowed by the cracks. In this case, Togo's judgment directly determines their life and death. It must be sharp enough, brave enough, and vigilant enough. The huge waves lifted the floating ice and tilted the smooth ice surface, making it almost impossible for them to stand normally. Seppala looked back and saw a huge piece of ice falling down and the surging waves rushing towards him. Seppala could only shout for them to rush quickly. The floating ice behind him continued to break under the impact of the huge waves. The cracking sound of the ice surface did not scare Togo away. It led the team to bravely shuttle through it as fast as the wind, passing through one difficult and dangerous road after another. Victory was in sight. Togo stopped because the ice layer under his feet was too far from the shore. Seeing that it was only one step away, Seppala planned to give it a try. Seppala threw Togo directly onto the shore and then pulled the entire ice layer with Togo's strength, but this also consumed its last bit of strength. Gas. After arriving at the post station, the owner's wife caressed Togo, who was sleeping soundly, and burst into tears. She said in dialect that the dog was about to die. Seppala asked her why she was crying, but the owner said that the smoke had just irritated her eyes. After a simple night's rest, they decided to set off again. Before leaving, the owner suddenly stopped Seppala and took him to the strait he had crossed yesterday. At this time, there was no ice on the sea surface. The scene in front of him made Seppala feel scared. There were only the last 32 kilometers left. Seppala couldn't bear to let Togo spend more time and wanted to let him sit on the sled. But no matter how Seppala persuaded Togo, he would return to the leader's position without hesitation, because that was its position is its glory. From birth to death, Seppala could only tie a rope for it helplessly. When passing through a forest, the weather became worse and worse. The wind and snow covered the sky, and visibility was extremely low. Seppala could hardly see anything. He could only tell Togo again that it was up to him to do it next. Seppala said to Togo, "Take us to the next station. You can do it." The snow fell deeper and deeper, and the sky became darker and darker. In the end, Seppala couldn't stand the fatigue and fell asleep on the sled, giving his life and trust to Togo. After an unknown period of time, when Seppala woke up, he found that the sled had stopped and the dogs were lying on the ground motionless. He realized that it was not good, and hurried to Togo, was lying on the ground, tired. Seppala asked him to hold on a little longer. "We would all die if we stopped here." But Togo was too tired this time. No matter how Seppala begged, he didn't even have the strength to open his eyes. Just when Seppala was about to fall into despair, a faint light shone from behind. The person was a staff member of the post station. It turned out that Togo had brought the team to the door of the post station before he fell down. Just as his wife said, Togo could bring the will to survive to his tribe. The next day, a sled with Serum rushed to the town. In order to grab the headlines, the reporters who had been waiting for a long time took a photo of the last sled team and made Balto the hero of this relay race. Soon, Balto's name spread all over the United States. A sculpture was built for him in New York's Central Park. The children who were infected also regained their youthful vitality because of the timely rescue. The few days of recuperation at the post station also gave Seppala and his companions new energy. After the snowstorm, everything was peaceful. The way home was not far away. Seppala decided to accompany Togo and the team members to walk back step by step, because even if Togo was burdened with a little more, it would be a painful torture for Seppala. Dogs cannot enter the bedroom for Togo. At this time, Seppala completely changed his instrumental understanding of sled dogs. Now he regards them more as friends, partners, and children. Although others have become the saviors of the town, people know who is the real hero of the town. They all sent blessings and items to Seppala, but Seppala was still full of sorrow at this time. What he was most concerned about was undoubtedly Togo's physical condition. One of the little girls who was saved by the serum looked at the weak Togo. With tears in his eyes, he asked if it was dying. Although the child's words were innocent, they touched Seppala's sore spot. He ran out of the door. His wife comforted Seppala that she was just a child and had no ill intentions. "You should imagine the situation where the neighbor lost his daughter and I lost my husband." Seppala said with guilt that it was me who pushed Togo to death. At this time, he was not ready to accept Togo's departure. After a while, life gradually got back on track. The injured Togo still stuck to Seppala all day long, but Seppala deliberately distanced himself from it that day because he had to go to work, and it was difficult for Togo to fight with him again. Although he was reluctant, he still left Togo at home and set off with a new team alone, looking at Seppala's back. Togo seemed to have returned to his childhood and sobbed in pain. It jumped to the door with its injured paw. In the surprise of his wife, he turned the door handle, and Togo successfully escaped from prison like a child, and then limped towards Seppala desperately. Gradually, Togo seemed to forget the pain, and his front legs seemed to have recovered. He became the fastest leader again. Seppala seemed to feel Togo's arrival. Looking back, he saw Togo running towards him just like he did 12 years ago. Seppala used to think Togo was born for sledding, but now he realizes that Togo was born for him. Since that day, Seppala stopped sledding. His wife was right. Togo had the will to survive. It survived again. After all, the once-in-a-century blizzard could not stop it. After retirement, it had a new identity, father. It left many offspring in the past 2 years. People in the United States are praising Balto, but sledders all over the world are scrambling to get Togo's offspring. They are smart, tough, and brave dogs. The most important thing is their gentle character and extraordinary emotions with humans. Togo left them on a Thursday in December. Seppala and his wife continue to work as dog breeders. Although Togo is no longer there, but Seppala can always see it in the mountains. At this time, Seppala suddenly realized that a good dog may not accompany you for a lifetime, but it will accompany you for a lifetime. Togo is directed by Eric Sonkel, starring Willem Dafoe and Julianne Nicholson. Adventure drama film released in 2019. The film is adapted from a true event that took place in Nome in 1925. The vaccine site at that time was 1,085 kilometers away from Nome, and 20 sled teams participated in the Serum Relay. The 19 teams ran an average of 50 kilometers, while Togo's team ran the most dangerous 425 kilometers. Its deeds were sealed for 86 years until 2011, when Time magazine reported Togo as the most heroic animal in history. Togo's birth seemed like a joke of fate. He was so thin and weak that Seppala even thought he was not qualified to be a sled dog. But this seemingly weak Siberian sled dog used 4 feats of escaping from the cage to prove that the dignity of life does not lie in bloodline or size. It lies in the will to never give up. It smashed the glass, broke the cage, and climbed the chimney. Every time it broke free, it was like a silent declaration that Togo was born to belong to the wilderness, not the cage. Well, today's movie sharing is here. Welcome to like, comment, and forward. Thank you for your patience. Looking forward to meeting you next time.